Welcome to Studio Sessions. I'm Will Donovan, and alongside,
I'm Julie Hamer.
and we're here to spark your creative journey and help you build the studio of your dreams. And each of these episodes, we're going to dive into expert tips, real talk, and actionable insights that support potters like you in launching and growing your own creative spaces. So let's fire up the kilns and let's get started.
All right. Hey, Will, how's it going?
Hey, Julie, I'm doing so well. How are you?
I'm good. All right. Are you ready for today's episode?
I'm so ready. I've been thinking and dealing with kilns for the past week, and I'm ready to talk about it finally.
Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I've been wanting to have this conversation about Kiln, so I am so excited.
Good. Well,
I was gonna make a joke about how fired up I am. I'm even wearing my totally Kiln it shirt, but
that's perfect. You're very well themed for today.
yes, I'm on task. I'm ready to go. So, yes, Will and I are going to be talking about kilns. What is it like to have a kiln in your studio? Where do you even begin with getting a kiln at home? Assuming that you have a home studio or maybe even starting a business and looking into kilns. And just the different pros and cons of different types of kilns.
Yeah, there's so many different kinds out there. And for somebody who's never had their own kiln before and wants to start their own pottery studio, there's just a lot of information gap, or there's so much information you don't know where to start. So, hopefully, in this episode, we'll break down what's available for potters, what are some good options, and just talk about the pros and cons of each so that you can make some informed decisions as you start your own studio.
Yeah, and I think one of the main things too, there are so when we talk about different types of kilns, my first thought is, oh, there's electric kilns and wood fire kilns and gas fire kilns. But I think today's focus is primarily going to be on what's more popular to have at a home studio, which is an electric kiln. Um, so I think we're going to kind of focus on that, what it's like to have an old kiln versus a new kiln. Like if you're looking to buy something used, manual versus digital, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because even in just the electrical realm, which is probably the most accessible for people who are starting their own studio space, there's a lot to choose from. You've got different sizes, but I think if I'm right in guessing, we're mainly talking about the different controller options today, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I have both a kilns. I mean, I have two digital kilns and I have a kiln sitter in my garage. So I have three kilns right now. But my manual kiln, my kiln sitter, is much older. It's
Mm,
from the 1970s. It's a test kiln, very tiny test kiln, and it's great. I love it. Easy to use, very straightforward. Just put the little parametric bar in there, like turn it up by hand as I go. But there's something so nice about just being able to go to my digital kilns, turn it on, like flip on a switch, have my pre-programmed firing schedules in there, select which one I want, hit start, and walk away.
yeah, that's the nice part. It's really just having that automation take over, and then you're free to do whatever you want.
Absolutely. So for those wondering in greater detail, I have so many notes. Which I sent you. I mean, we will. You and I worked on these, and I've added way too much information. I'm the type of person that overcomplicates information when it comes to uh, just pottery in general. I feel like, but there is just so much information out there, and I just love it all. But for those wondering, a kiln sitter is known as a manual kiln, and it's just a device that's used to control the firing process. So there's like these two little bars and this other little rod, and you put your parametric bar in between, and then as your kiln is ramping up, you have to turn it by hand. So some nozzles are like 1 through 10 as the numbers, 1 being lowest, 10 being higher in terms of temperature. Some of them have multiple levels depending on the size of your kiln, or it's just like low, medium, and high.
Yeah.
Um, and you just every couple of hours go out, turn up your kiln, and that's just what you do. You set a timer and you slowly turn your kiln up fire like to fire higher and higher until it reaches temperature. Once it does, that bar or cone, whatever you use, is going to melt. It's going to drop that rod, which lets go of a little arm on the outside, and it flips this little switch and shuts off your kiln. Um, and it's as straightforward as that. And as compared to a digital kiln, which is actually has some sort of computer on it where you can type in, "Hey, I want you to ramp fire up like 250 degrees Fahrenheit per hour until you reach this specific temperature of cone that I'm going for," and then it'll shut off for you. And then you can even tell it to slow cool to get different results if you want.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So maybe to begin, let's stick on manual kilns for a little bit and talk about what kiln sitters are, how they're used, and maybe some pros and cons. I love how you were describing the function of it because it really does make me think about how ingenious those little devices are that somebody had the thought process to create a completely mechanical device that would shut off at a particular temperature. Um,
Yeah.
those those switches you were talking about from it's been a long time since I've used a manual kiln, but we've sold so many parts through sales at Clay King, just helping people who still own those manual kilns. There's so many potters out there who still have them, and they're being recycled into new markets or used markets like on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or just passed down person to person. That there's still so many people out there who need the parts and need to know how they function. Um, so yeah, they're very still relevant part of ceramics today in people's home and hobby pottery studios.
Yeah, and what's nice too with the pros of using a kiln sitter, it's very cost effective. They're going to be a lot of the well, I mean, I think a few companies still make kiln sitters, but I found that they're still more budget friendly for hobbyists or those who have limited resources or who are just starting. And again, with Facebook Marketplace, there are so many kiln sitters, manual kilns on Facebook Marketplace for like 500, $600, and they're in pretty good condition too. Um, I mean, at least some of the ones that I've seen, the kiln brick looks nice. The everything, all the parts that look great. So you're going to find they're probably a lot more simplistic to use. They're cheaper if you're just starting out. But just like it's just a very straightforward way of operation. Again, with just putting in that bar and just remembering to ramp it up. So that's the only thing is just it relies on your memory to set a timer or just be like, "Oops, that's right. I got to turn up my kiln." Um,
I remember having the alarms go off every hour when I was running kiln sitters, and I'd have to go back to the art studio to turn up to the next degree to make sure it continues getting hotter and hotter.
Yeah. And I've had people tell me too, they're like, "Oh, I just like have my kiln in my garage, my kiln sitter in my garage or in my shed or whatever, and they have a baby monitor on it." And they'll just look on their phone with a camera. And I'm like, "Oh, that's such a smart idea, just like to see if it's shut off on its own or once it finally if they get up to the highest, they can turn the nozzles and they just check on it so they don't have to keep walking out there." And I love that. I think that's really smart. So but mechanically, it's pretty reliable too. They have fewer electrical components, which means less malfunctions and less technical expertise. You don't have
At,
to worry about all of the film wear.
at least with the little sensitive electrical parts, you're right.
Mhm.
Inside those little kiln sitters, there's so many tiny little parts that can potentially need maintenance over time. If you've ever seen one of those like exploded diagrams of what it looks like in a kiln sitter, um,
Yeah, I
there
still have the original manual for mine, my 1971.
oh wow, that's impressive. It was sometimes one of the most challenging parts about helping people replace parts in a kiln sitter is figuring out exactly which tiny little mechanism they need to replace. But luckily, I think Skutt bought out Dawson, who still produced a lot of the kiln sitter parts, and they still make or at least supply or source a lot of those parts still. So you can still get them, though I don't think they create new kiln sitter kilns on models anymore. Like the KS Skutt Kiln series, I think is done as a few years ago.
Yeah, they do create the parts, but not the kilns, because I get my element from them. They redo the element for me on my Dawson.
That's
Actually, that's what model my little 8x8 little itty bitty kiln sitter is.
they just truck.
So
As long as they
yeah,
don't break irreparably, you can still use them.
yeah, and it's nice. It does have a bunch of little parts, but I don't have to worry about overheating a motherboard.
Right, and that
So
is
I don't get if it's really hot in the garage when I'm firing my other kilns. I don't have to worry about my baby kiln being setting off an error saying, "Hey, it's too hot."
mhm.
It just it keeps going.
It says I don't
It's
care
like
what.
what's it's like what's heat? I don't care.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
but yeah, the I feel like the manual control over it was a more hands-on, having that more hands-on approach. I know a lot of people like having that. I've heard a lot of older potters say, "Well, I prefer being able to fire everything by hand rather than rely on a digital kiln that I
yeah,
have to then like mess with thermocouples and
yeah,
whatever."
I think there's definitely a tendency to like what you learn on, and
Mhm.
definitely there's an old school of Potter class that really just loves and appreciates the kiln sitters because, like, in using them, you do kind of get a clearer understanding about how kilns like function and how heat work works and how that impacts the results of your pottery. Whereas with the digital kiln, it can be a lot like a microwave where you hit a button, you walk away, and like the knowledge gap of like what comes in because of what's happening inside the kiln might not like seep in or like get into your understanding. So
Right.
that tactile experience of, oh, I turn this switch on, this section gets hotter, it makes this cone bend, and af- now my pots are done. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that is another, I think, pro of kiln sitters is that even if it does require more intentionality on part of the user, you're getting that tactile experience, which helps understand, at least in part, this is how a kiln functions and why heat work is important, and maybe some of the uh, different effects you can get um, out of a kiln sitter versus electric kiln.
Yes, and I like that aspect too of the kiln sitters. Um, and I will say too though that when jumping from all these pros of kiln sitters to a few, or, I mean, I don't know, I don't have any more pros. I feel like we've pretty much covered it.
I think so.
But jumping from pros to cons, I will say though, the the precision that I get, in my digital kilns compared to, my manual kilns, there was a huge difference. No, not so much a huge difference, but definitely a difference in
Right.
my 2 kilns. Um, and, being able to have a very specific, reflection of the temperature in my digital kiln, with it also tracking for me to show what happened, because if I fire my manual kiln and I'm like, "Oh, this didn't do something right," I don't know what happened. I don't know what wrong during the kiln firing. Like, did I turn it up too quickly? Is the element, like, I'm looking at the element, oh, it looks fine. Like, what
Right.
else is there?
Right.
Did I like, what did I do wrong? Whereas my digital kiln is like, there's an error for this and an error for that, and this is what it looked like when you ramped it up, or this jumped up too high or whatever. So, but it gives you that nice little like actual visual of how it fired, after, while it's firing and after it fired. So, um, there are also, of course, limited features in the digital or the manual kiln. You go in and you ramp it up by hand. You can have like, I do have one of those. Oh, I can't even remember what it's called. It's like a thermocouple on a computer that I can put into the side. I got it at Clicking. Um, yes, yeah, I was gonna say it's the name is escaping me. Thank you. But yeah, I have one of those, and it's nice to have that to check on my manual kiln. But then I can't tell my manual kiln to do anything specific. It all relies on me. So I just imagine potters. I'm doing a lot of crystalline firing now, and it's so nice to be able to plug in specific kiln firing schedules into my kiln with my two thermocouples in there that are very precise and don't miss a beat, as compared to, I can't imagine potters doing that back in the day with manual kilns where I mean, they absolutely had to rely on basically sleeping next to their kilns and setting an alarm, um, and making sure they fired it accurately to get the results they wanted.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, just the intentionality that has to come into play with manual kilns, I think probably could be another one of the cons. In addition to lack of precision is just that it really relies on only you. Like you have to be there. If you can't load the kiln until 8, 9 o'clock at night, well, you got to be up turning the switches all through the night until it hits temperature. So having it rely completely on you is also one of the downsides of them.
Yeah, so it's nice to have a kiln sitter for a cost-effective or simplistic solution, but the trade-offs could be potentially precision, the features, the limited features, I should say. And then you had mentioned, of course, Dawson being owned by Skutt. I had a few other things on here. Gare Kilns, JW Good Kilns, the Good Kiln Company, and the S&O Industries are no longer in service. So they're and Duncan is now owned by Paragon, at least Duncan Kiln, the that part of Duncan, the kilns, production of it is owned by Paragon. But um, if you, I sometimes I see these kilns being listed online, these manual kilns, and I'm like, wow, that kiln is no longer in service. And I
Right.
don't think that people realize that you can't get replacement parts for it.
Or if
Or you have to dig around and find another company that can do it for you.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of those companies too, like I remember when my old Scut, there was a kiln sitter that I upgraded to a digital kiln. I had them build a computer box for me. They also have to do a very specific thing with my elements because they don't have that model of kiln anymore. They don't make elements for it. So every time they my kiln elements, it's like $100 more because they have to go out of their way to make it very specific for my kiln bricks and the way that they're shaped on the inside. They're like, we don't have that kiln anymore. We don't have that model. So it's not like we can just go pull it off the shelf. They have to specifically make it for my kiln.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, luckily there are still kiln companies. I know Scott will do that occasionally. I've heard of Olympic kilns will do that for other people who are making parts or elements for kilns that don't exist anymore. But I can imagine it probably becomes more costly if you need a custom part, or it's just more friction in being able to replace and reuse and maintain your kiln as you go along.
Yeah.
What about as
Um,
Um, the difference between digital and manual, what do you think about just energy efficiency? Like, do you think digital kilns are more efficient with how they utilize electricity because they're know precisely when to turn off and they're not reliant on a person who might forget to turn up the heat and might sit on a particular segment for a while?
that
What do
is a great question. I have never actually tested like my energy bill compared to like digital versus manual, but I would assume that with digital kilns, they would be a little more cost effective just because with the programming firing schedules, they are like telling how much electricity to come in and out of it and instead of it just being constantly on. And
Yeah, you're right.
yes, if you forget, again, if you forget too, that's another con. If you forget and you leave your kiln on a certain temperature for like 8 hours overnight when you're asleep,
Mhm.
it gets stuck. You're in trouble and so are your pieces. And yes, that's cost of energy. I found with my digital kilns, I was able to program it based off of my electrical company and it has a little pre-programmed thing in there, another wonderful thing. So I can go in and say, hey, this is how much money or how much energy, whatever's coming into my house. I can put in how many kilowatts per hour.
Mhm.
And the kiln tells me every time I fire it, hey, it costs you $1.63. Hey, it costs you $4.50. It will tell me, depending on what I fire and how long, how much it costs. And I think that's great. So I may not know a bit exactly which one's more efficient, or more cost efficient when it comes to electrical, but I feel like digital at least gives me more of an idea.
Right. I mean,
So,
it tells you almost exactly how much. And just a note on that too, I do feel like kiln firing a kiln costs a lot less than people think because
hmm
there's so many times I've talked to people buying a kiln and they automatically assume it's going to be this outrageous electricity bill. But really, you're right. It costs like I'm not sure what size kiln you're talking about when you describe like $1 or $4 firings, but I have a 7 cubic foot Skutt kiln, and it costs me between $6 and $10 depending on if I'm running a bisque or a glaze. So they're as far as efficiency goes, they really are accessible to people, and it's not going to drive up your electricity bill too much.
yeah, I think my L&L that I just bought is, oh gosh, I don't know. I'd have to look. Um, it's not huge. It's not super tall, but it is wide. But I would say probably about 5 cubic feet. I'd have to look it up. I should know that offhand. But with those dual thermal couples and it just being as precise as it is, that's the one that tells me. hey, a bisque fire is less than $2, and even a crystalline glaze firing is usually only about 5 or 6. So it's extremely efficient, which is awesome.
That's
Um, but having to being able to program kiln firing schedules in that,
yeah.
again, just the ease of being able to create and store custom firing programs for myself with just like a push of a button. Also, the Wi-Fi controller. I can be in the grocery store. I could be taking a trip up to Clay King and being like, "Oh, what is my kiln at?" And just like open up my app and it says, "Oh, okay, your kiln is at this, this part of the firing process and it's on this ramp and it's at this temperature and everything's good." And if anything's wrong, it'll tell me like, "Hey, if there's this zone is firing a little cool or a little too hot or whatever." It
Oh,
tells me all of that stuff, which is great.
I feel like we've just time traveled. If we've gone from manual kilns to Wi-Fi enabled grocery shopping alerts, let's let's make a transition and talk about what these different electrical or electronic digital controllers look like. What kind of describe for me what kiln you've got, what kind of controller you've got. Where are we going?
Yeah, so I have an old kiln sitter Skutt model that I upgraded to a Genesis controller.
Okay.
Right? And then on my L&L kiln, same thing. I was so spoiled with it, I had to have the Genesis controller. That is the model that I have, rather than the thing that looks like, I mean, for the best way I could describe it is an old telephone with the buttons 0 through 9
Oh yeah.
hit people program like that. I have that Genesis controller, that Wi-Fi controller, the Barlett pair,
Mm-hmm.
and I love it. I love it so much. I love them because then I can just name my kilns. I have Small Paul. 'Cause I used
Small.
to have my other kiln was Peter because I used to steal from Peter to pay Paul. Um,
That's not
and then my new kiln is Calcifer.
cool.
My L&L kiln is Calcifer. And yeah, it's great to have those Wi-Fi enabled controllers, and they're a little bit more expensive, but to me, it's totally worth it if you're going to buy a brand new kiln with a digital controller. Pay the extra, what was 175 or $200 to get the. You might as well.
Right.
So that way you don't have to think about it when I'm not going to say turn on some hot firing box and then leave your house, but you know what I mean. If it's the ease of being able to be like, oh, I don't have to get up from my studio and walk into my garage or wherever. Um, Especially if your kiln is outside of your house, if it's in a shed somewhere or anything like that, you can just have the ease of looking at it, but then it records everything for you.
And that's one of the nicest parts too. Is not only does it like relay that information to your device via a mobile app, if you have the Wi-Fi enabled controllers, it'll record it too. And it'll kind of graph it, right? So it'll
Yes.
plot out the temperature segments and ramps and holds to let you know exactly what it's doing, when it's doing it, and how long it's doing it for.
Yeah, and I'm looking at like Kim's website right now as I sidetrack because I was like, I want to know the very specific name of this
Yeah.
um
So
this box that I have.
there's two main different kinds of or touchscreen controllers that are Wi-Fi enabled. You've got the Genesis, which is more prominent on Olympic or L&L models. Um, Even Heat has a tap controller, which I believe has Wi-Fi capability and temperature plotting. But then Skutt has the KMT or the Kiln Master touchscreen. I believe all of them are made by Bartlett Electronics. Um,
Yes.
but the different user face between each of them is just a little bit unique. Um, we'll find that just to describe it to people who might not have seen them before, the Kiln Master touchscreen is going to be more similar to like just an iPhone display. It's got that kind of rectangular 9 by 16 format. Um, but the benefit of those touchscreen controllers too is that everything is spelled out. There's no shorthand like code or like reference code that you have to refer to a manual to figure out what it's talking about. Everything's spelled out in complete words so that you can know how to navigate, to program, to fire, to figure out an error code. It's all right there.
Yeah, it's awesome, and, yeah, I like having that, and it's funny too because Skutt does build the Bartlett, the Genesis ones as well, and they had to for my kiln because they couldn't do it for my older model kiln.
Okay.
They were like, "We're just gonna do this, and you're gonna love it more," and I'm like, "Okay."
Nice. That's so handy.
So they fixed, yeah. So they took care of me there. But yeah, it's nice to have that. And I like the option too where if you're new to pottery and you're like, well, maybe I don't want to program my own firing schedule, it has something called a novice mode where you can just go into communications or go into programming and click on novice and it will already have pre-programmed in there um 022 all the way up to your cone 10 if your kiln goes up to cone 10, and then you can just hit it and hit slow, medium, or fast
Oh,
for
perfect.
your kiln firing for your kiln firing needs. So I could be like, oh, I'm gonna do an '06 bisque fire and I want it to go slow, and it will do that for me. And then that way you don't have to program anything in it if you don't want to learn that quite yet when you're starting off with your kiln. So
Yeah,
very user friendly, very nice. So
that's handy. Scott has something similar. It's called the cone fire mode. So either between the two different kind of kiln control types, you have that like easy option between the two. Um, but to my understanding, we also have options to do completely custom firings too, so we can really get into the nuances of what you want your glaze results to be like. So if you want a slow cool, or if you want a really slow warm up, you can customize each firing segment so that you can do exactly what you want. Correct?
yes, absolutely, and that's what was so helpful about doing crystalline firings in this new kiln, or just crystal firings in general with this Genesis controller on it, because I can just say, hey, I want this to be very specific. Go up to temperature, hold, drop, hold, up, hold, drop, hold, because that's what crystalline does. You want those rings to grow on the crystals, so you tell it to go up, down, up, down. And same thing we talked about during the last episode with Mike, with you moving your computer or your I'm sorry, your kiln
Mhm.
outside, especially with the colder weather, it's going to cool faster. So you can tell your kiln, hey, I need you to cool a little slower.
Yeah.
Um, or if you get that those coyote glazes that need to be cooled, because they have some crystalline
Mhm.
glazes too, and you can program it to do that slow cool. Um, and the precision is just on point with those digital boxes. It's awesome.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really nice slow cool firing programs that you can find online or you can kind of develop yourself. But just taking even just a like a normal glaze that you've used over and over and over again, just to like a straight cone 5 or 6, it's crazy how much different variation or effects can come from just a little slow cool, like controlling the rate that it cools down. You can get something totally different or really unique. Um, which, if you are using store bought glazes, is a really cool way to be able to set your work apart from the mass majority of people who are using like an Amico's Potter's Choice, is being able to slow cool it and make it look a little different. So that way nobody's like very familiar with that color that's sitting on your pot at the table at the farmer's market or wherever you're selling.
Yeah, I could go up to people's booths and be like, ceramic booths, and be like, I know exactly what glaze that is.
Right. And like
You know,
Potter's,
and that's what, yeah, and that's why I love doing crystalline glazes. It's like it sets me apart from other people, other potters. I can make, and you can make your own, and again, yeah, play with the temperature control and the firing schedule. So having a new digital kiln, or just a digital kiln in general, precision and control, ease of use, the safety features. I talked about it having an error if it gets too hot, or it's like, oh, hey, by the way, um, this is, firing too quickly, firing too slowly. I had an electrical issue that I didn't even know about, and my kiln shut off at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was like, what's wrong with my kiln? So I shut it off, turned off the breaker, unplugged my kiln from the wall, opened up the box. One of the wires had popped out.
oh man, and it caught it for you. Yeah, I had
And
similar.
it caught it for me and didn't catch on fire.
That's that's a
No.
I had a
So,
all-mounted kiln box that we just installed. Converted an old manual kiln into a digital kiln, and inside the box there was a loose contact that I didn't know about, and where the power cord connected near the relays. And
Mhm.
luckily, it started overheating and the controller shut down. Um, because the controller was mounted on the wall of our studio, it could have been really bad if it didn't catch that and just kept firing, and trying to pump electricity into it. So, yeah, the safety features and being able to shut the kiln off in case of emergency automatically is, I think, well worth the extra cost of a digital controller, too.
Absolutely. So when people come to me and say, "Julie, what do you recommend? A manual kiln, like a kiln sitter, or a digital kiln with a computer on it?" I say, go ahead and spend the extra money to, to go ahead and do the digital kiln, just because, if anything,
Yeah.
the safety is, yeah,
Because at the
what I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. At the end of the day, it's your studio, it's your space, it's your investment, and
It's your home
yeah,
potentially if it's in your house. I mean, knowing that through an error, it was aggravating at first, but then when I opened up the kiln and I saw that, I was like, "Thank goodness I have this digital kiln that told me, 'Hey, dummy, you didn't check you haven't checked your wires in a while,
yeah,
um, and you need to do this.'" Yeah, I was just like, "Thank goodness." So, yeah, and efficiency too. I mean, I do feel like the newer kilns, I'm kind of backtracking a bit. I feel like the newer kilns, especially when I got my L&L, I noticed a huge difference in my kiln brick, just the density in my kiln brick
okay,
and the way they make it now, and the way they make newer kiln brick now compared to old kiln brick. I feel like it's just a slightly better insulation, which could help with energy efficiency. Um, but just, yeah, you don't have to monitor it as often. I feel like it's more versatile in terms of firing, and also just again that consistency. It's nice
It-
to have consistency.
yeah, it's so crucial, especially if you're getting to a point where you want to sell your work or you're producing for a client, and you can't have pieces coming out vastly different if you're trying to recreate effects.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Well, cons on digital kill no cons. So we talk about cons.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah,
definitely a higher cost.
yeah, they cost more,
Cost more maintenance. I feel like because you have more things inside of yeah. I
but
mean, firmware updates are pretty easy, but
right. And I think with the Wi-Fi ones, they do those automatically too, as long as they're connected.
they
Um,
do.
yeah, they'll do software updates. I I think the cost though, with I think the pros definitely outweigh the cost or the cons of digital controller.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I think that be honestly, my only con would be the cost of it, but at the same time, I'm like, you're paying for quality and you're paying for efficiency and you're paying for reliability and you're paying for safety when it
right.
comes down to it.
If they didn't have those preset like easy mode firing options too, I'd probably say a potential con is just I don't know where to start or I don't know how to program this. But I'd say to
Yeah.
anyone who's worried about uh, not knowing how to use a kiln that's digital is that if you can use a microwave, you really can program your electric kiln. Like it's incredibly simple the way they lay out these controllers. And there are v- so many YouTube tutorials that'll walk you through program instructions. Almost every kiln manufacturer has their own like step by step process. And between the Genesis and the Kilnmaster, whether you're buying from Skutt or L&L or Olympic or even Heat, there's definitely resources to walk you through these really simple instructions to make sure that you know this is how I start my kiln.
Yes, and they all come with manuals. They give me even my L&L kiln came with this beautifully made binder that not only included my kiln specific information, but then all of the other kilns that they
Yeah,
have. Like, here are some of the other options. That's, this is your kiln specifically. And then the next page was like, here are other options that we have available and how all of these work. And here's the inside workings, and the way it's laid out is just so beautiful. And even the cord, like the wires on the inside are labeled like 1 through 6 of where they go to each element. And I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful.
can't tell you how helpful that was the first time I went to change elements.
Oh my gosh, I didn't have that in my kiln sitters when I was doing that the first time. I was like taping them as I was going, and then I was
Where,
taking
oh,
pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a mess. What a
I
mess. Oh, the time I called L&L, like, in tears, just like, "I love you guys." They're like, "What? Okay,
what
we
we're
love
doing.
you too." Like, "I
Yeah.
got my kiln and it's beautiful and you labeled the elements." They're like, "Of course we did." They're like, anything for our clients. They were so sweet. Yeah.
There they are.
Yep.
Yeah. Can definitely be scary for somebody who wants to buy a kiln for the first time, but not know where to start or what to get. But thankfully, there's so many different resources. And whether or not you're doing that research on your own on the internet or listening to this podcast, or even if you need to call somebody, if I could make a plug, Clay King has an excellent set of sales team members who are really expert, knowledgeable on all things kiln. So they're available resource there too if you need any guidance.
Absolutely. And you guys have a whole warehouse full of kilns.
So full, too full.
Too full. Come and get them, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Off our hands.
Oh.
Well,
Well, how
Julie, is
about you, Will? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I think we were going to ask each other the same question. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that we should cover?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, what else do you think? What else should we cover with this? Yeah. Oh my goodness, just don't I was gonna say don't be afraid, but after working in a studio at a grad school level, even in undergrad, I got to load, unload, and fire kilns, monitored, but then in grad school I was required to do it, just figure it out for a lot of them too. And I felt so at ease after a while of doing it. And then when I got my own kiln in my home, I was still nervous. So
Oh,
it's
sure.
okay. And you're gonna have those jitters. You're gonna have and it's totally fine. No matter where you are in your experience in doing ceramics, you're gonna be a little nervous, and that's fine. It's totally understandable. It's relatable. Take a deep breath. You have resources out there. You have people out there who are willing to help you. Will mentioned even Clay King people will be happy to help you out. But you have a good amount of people and potters who will help get you through it, and hopefully this will help start you out as well.
Absolutely. Well, Julie, I think this has been a really informative and hopefully helpful talk about the differences between manual kilns and digital kilns and what you should get as you're investing in your own studio space. So,
Yes, absolutely. And you know, I think you guys too put out that video, yeah, of Mike talking about the different kilns and
yeah. So if you're listening to this recently, you can go to Clay King's YouTube page and check out everything kiln buyers need to know when purchasing their first kilns. And we'll kind of walk you through the A to B's, the most common mistakes and missteps people make, so you don't have to make them. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
So
And
just be safe and have fun, and just enjoy yourself.
And we have our own email address for this podcast now, don't we? So if you have questions, you can email us directly and we'll reach back out or respond in a future episode, don't we?
Yes, we have it's studio sessions clay at gmail.com, and you can reach out to Will and I there, and we'll be happy to answer your questions, or even if you have suggestions for future podcasts, we will gladly take those on. Anything to help you guys out.
Absolutely. I really love to hear from you. And if you are listening to the episode on Spotify or wherever it is you're listening, give us a rating. Let us know what you think. This is a very new pottery podcast, so we're interested in your feedback. Definitely, as we're developing future episodes, what to talk about, and maybe guests to have. So, absolutely, reach out, let us know, rate and review,
Yep.
smash that.
Thank you guys. Yeah, yeah. Thank you guys for listening to us, and also follow us on Instagram. I'm Busy Daydreams Pottery, and Will.
Is Donovan
Let's
Pot?
see. Let's say let us shout ourselves out a little bit.
Mine as well.
Shameless plugs. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We hope you enjoy it. Keep creating, have fun, and thank you for joining us today.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, guys.